Thank you for tuning in. I believe everyone who's watching right now is part of the solution that I'm creating. This channel is called Master Media, and my name is Jessica, and I'm your host. The purpose of this show is to together, everybody, recreate our future. And we do this by focusing on every major topic and area and industry that matter most to us both today and for the future. And I think if we do this, we can solve every major problem we're currently facing, from poverty to war to lack of jobs to global warming. And I believe that if we take the time, if I take the time to interview top leaders and innovators in every major area that I just listed, and there are others, I think we can give a microphone and a voice to those who have the answers. Because I believe that we cannot simply rely on our governments. We can't rely on solutions and systems that we've relied on so far up until today. Those serve their purpose and laid the groundwork, I believe. But I believe we're currently undergoing a revolution, a global revolution, where it's time to rebuild, to remake ourselves. And I believe we need to do this crowdsource style, meaning we call on everyone, that's anyone, in every major area, as I said. We give them a microphone and a voice to share the solutions they have. And in doing so, we not only educate ourselves, starting with myself, but we also create new business and new solutions by bringing in private money, private equity from the private sector. I believe with the solutions together, we can recreate our future. We don't have to rely on our governments. We can do it. So that's the point and purpose of the show. We'll tackle one subject, one industry at a time. So I'm very excited. This has been a long time coming. It's been my vision to do this for a few years now. But with all my different experience, background in politics and hemp and cannabis and now blockchain and crypto, it's time. Like a seed, things take time to blossom. So our time has come, and let's get started.
Nice.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. On this call this evening, we'll be interviewing Joel Segal, a climate activist that has an extensive background in politics. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining, Joel. Could you please start by introducing yourself, and if you could just mention a few of your accomplishments and so on and so forth.
Yeah, hey, Jessica Gonzales. Great to see you. Great to hear your voice in Thailand. And I'm Joel Segal. I am a professional musician. I'm an actor. I'm a poet. But I have been a lifelong social justice activist working on ending poverty, ending homelessness, universal health care. I wrote the bill Medicare for All that Bernie Sanders ran on. I am the executive director of the Justice Action Mobilization Network. We're a multiracial rainbow. We're global. We're in Africa. We're in Europe, Middle East. We want the world to transition rapidly to 100% clean, renewable energy, 80% in the next 10 years, 100% by 2045 or sooner. If we don't transition to 100% clean, renewable energy, we're going to have a radical disruption in our ecosystem, and civilization would literally, be threatened. In Congress, I worked for John Conyers, the great late John Conyers, the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus, was there for 40 years, protege of Martin King. I led the effort on universal health care. I wrote the first bill on a jobs guarantee. I wrote the first resolution on climate change. Led the effort on Hurricane Katrina relief bill. I wrote that bill, led that effort to get it passed. I wrote legislation to reduce resident physician work hours from 120 hours to 80. They were working them literally to death, these hospitals. And now I'm working on COVID-19 emergency response group to make sure that people get what they need during this terrible pandemic. That's what I do for a living. And then I'm also a writer. I'm writing a book on John Conyers, writing his biography. But other than that, I'm not very busy.
Thank you. That's quite impressive. I think it's important to start by telling the public who you are, just because you're now leading, or you have been leading rather, Jamn's organization. And the leaders that lead and whatever they're leading matters. It matters. And I think that if the public knew and knows now who you are, that says so much, You mentioned, yes, and you mentioned Jamn. I know the organization has been active now for 7 years.
That's right.
And you mentioned, how many years is it that we all have to transition to green energy? You said, was it 10 years?
Yeah, according to climate scientist Mark Jacobson, who I'm a very close, dear friend of mine, we have and Michael Mann, Dr. Michael Mann, we have about 10 years to do the bulk of the transition. So it's 100% clean, renewable energy in all the energy sectors. So it's transportation, agriculture, utility generation, ships, that travel, airplanes. We have to do that, or our Earth's atmosphere, the temperature will increase. If we go past 1.5 degrees centigrade or 2 degrees centigrade, an increase in our temperature, it's irreversible calamity that we've never even seen before. Corn tassels won't be able to pollinate. Bees won't be able to pollinate. It would be too hot. Locusts descending now on East Africa, probably by January, February, who could literally eat up the entire food supply. And according to CNN, National Geographic, 20 to 30 million people facing starvation, coastal cities inundated with water due to the melting of the Greenland ice sheet, and West Antarctica. Hurricanes and tsunamis that we've never seen before, Hurricane 4 and 5. Whenever you say a Hurricane 4 or 5, that means it's 5 times more powerful than Hurricane 1. We're looking at flooding that we've never seen, especially the flooding of crops. So in America, what used to be cornfields have now turned into ponds. So there's, but the good news is we do have enough time to staunch the bleeding, but only if we rapidly convert to 100% clean renewable energy. And I'm drafting the legislation with several of the leading climate scientists and leaders in clean energy right now to make that happen. I'm really excited about this legislation. There hasn't been anything introduced in Congress like this yet, but it also needs to be done around the world. So Mark Jacobson of the Solutions Project in Stanford has a plan for every country in the world to transition. So I'm working on that as well, a global transition.
Thank you. Could you list a few members that are part of Jamn's organization?
Yeah. We got Mustafa Ali, who's the former senior advisor to President Obama on the environment, number 2 at the Environmental Protection Agency. He's our honorary chair. Dolores Huerta, who led with Cesar Chavez the farm workers struggle in California and across the nation. The legendary Harriet Fulbright, Senator Fulbright's wife, formerly of the Fulbright Scholarship Fund, as another honorary chair. Reverend Gerald Durley, who was one of Martin King's lieutenants, one of the leading experts on climate change. He's involved. Reverend Rodney Sadler, one of the major leaders of the Poor People's Campaign in North Carolina, and a leading interfaith leader. Reverend Leo Woodbury, who's also a leader in environmental justice, is our vice chair. Former Mayor Jennifer Roberts of Charlotte, North Carolina. And then our other co-chair, Rudy Arredondo, president of Latino Farmers and Ranchers Association. And then our, probably two of our most important people is, Mark Jacobson, Professor Mark Jacobson. He's the leader of clean energy, renewable energy in the world. And then Dr. Harvard Ayers, another leader. And then I work with Dr. Michael Mann very closely as well, who's he's considered the leading climate scientist. So it's diverse and it's a rainbow and it's serious,
Thank you. Would you and could you explain what is in this bill that you are currently drafting?
Sure. What the bill does is it puts a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure. You won't be able to build, for example, an underground gas pipeline of frack gas. They call it natural gas. There's nothing natural about it. It's frack gas. Number two, it ends all fossil fuel subsidies. I think it's around $30 to $40 billion, where the federal government subsidizes the oil, gas, and coal companies. I don't know why. They got plenty of money. And then there would be a fund that would be set up like Social Security or Medicare to fund the transition to 100% clean renewable energy on the local, state, and federal level, including the military. And this would mean instead of having coal mines, we would have solar farms. Instead of having gas plants, we'd have solar thermal plants. And this bill would actually provide the funding and financial incentives for also energy conservation, clean energy generation, research and development. And you can't like transition without money. So, for example, in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, we just passed a 100% clean renewable energy transition in the transportation and housing sectors. I led that effort through Jamn, and the mayor of our city said, we can't really do this plan in the next 10 years because we can't afford the Proterra electric buses. So, okay, well, if there was a federal fund that, had dedicated revenue sources, she could write a grant proposal and get the funding. There would be tax incentives for like Duke Energy or Dominion, two of the largest utility operators in our country. Federal incentives to pay for the upfront cost of solar installation, wind energy installation. There's a lot of friction, between the grassroots and these utility companies, but there really shouldn't be. It's a win-win. They're going to make their money. It's just that they'll burn clean, not instead of burning coal and gas and oil, they'll use the sun and the wind. So there's no carbon footprint. There would be mandatory guidelines in terms of agricultural emissions. It's a big part of the carbon footprint. Then there would be money for the workers who are transitioned from a fossil fuel economy to a clean renewable energy economy. They'd get a salary up to $100,000 per year. They would stay on salary until they were retrained and put in a clean energy job. That's a big issue, is what happens to the workers. And then there's literally a green jobs Marshall Plan. So it's pretty progressive bill, but it's based on Mark Jacobson's work is what it's based on. I took Mark Jacobson's work and turned it into federal legislation, just like I did with Medicare for All. I took the work of 40 of the leading physicians in America and 4 economists, and I turned that into a bill, which is now the heralded HR 676 Medicare for All, which became the litmus test in the Democratic Party, which I never thought would happen for people running for president. I never thought I would see that. So I'm doing the same thing I've always done. Take the experts, listen to them, and turn their policies into legislation, build a movement, and get it passed.
Awesome. That's really quite amazing. Can you tell me when you think the bill will be ready?
Probably in about, I'd say 8 weeks, because what I got to do is I'm vetting the bill to every major organization in the country that works on climate change and green jobs. That's what I learned from John Conyers. You got to make people feel like it's their bill. And then I got to vet it to staffers and members of Congress. And I'd say probably about 2 months. It's already written, but I want to make sure that I get a chance to really vet the bill, listen carefully to other people who've got great ideas. And already the bill's been improved dramatically by just, listening to other people who know more than I do on, this issue.
Thank you. What would you say to those that feel like moving towards green energy or the government passing such a bill that essentially threatens, the petro industry? What would you say to that resistance? How do you plan to go about winning over Duke Energy, for instance? Or, could you just expound, what is your method?
Well, that's the single most important question, Jessica, that you've raised. What are we going to do about, these are roadblocks? The first thing you have to do is you have to sit down with the heads of Duke Energy, which I've been doing with several, former elected officials, dignitaries. We have to tell them that it's a win-win for the earth, for the people, and even for their shareholders and even for their profits. Instead of burning fossil fuels for electric generation, they're going to just use this wind, solar, hydro, wave, and there'd be incentives. So you got to bring them to your side. That's number one. Number two, they're going to have to be regulated by the federal government and the local, for example, in North Carolina, the North Carolina Utilities Commission is just going to have to regulate them. I call them the ownership class. They own an important resource, our electric power. And then you have to make sure that the workers are going to be protected. You don't want the workers against you like labor unions. You want them with you. And you have to just say, look, we're all in this together. We're not taking sides. You're not our enemy. But we have to save our planet. We have to save the succeeding generations from whether or not we're going to survive as a human species. I mean, cockroaches will be here. The earth will be here. We just won't. And there's no planet B. And so the talks are going very well so far, but it gets into the politics of, Democrats and Republicans fearing they'll lose their seats if they say no to a pipeline, say no to a gas pipeline because they think that, the cheap energy that's going to be fed to the manufacturing companies near them won't get the gas or they'll lose their seats. You have to let these people in state legislatures and office know that no, there are going to be about 7 million jobs created, and there'll be a lot more jobs, scores of more jobs in those districts than if you don't go to 100% clean renewable energy. So that's very important.
Thank you. In one of our previous conversations, you mentioned that Jamn is now more than just climate. It also includes and is connected to jobs for all or ending poverty.
Right.
Could you explain how those two work together, and is that included in the bill that you're drafting?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is included in the bill. By addressing climate change, you also address poverty, because if you're going to create 7 million new jobs, that's just in the United States, because there's global poverty that we care about ending as well. So you're going to really, it's a dramatic reduction in poverty. And the studies show that if you reduce poverty, increase wages, you reduce crime, incarceration rates, gang violence, drug use. So you're going to really save a lot of lives, actually, and keep communities from deteriorating. Number two, if we want to end homelessness, so by saying we want to end homelessness, if you're going to build about 7 million new apartments for people who are homeless or living doubled up, either with a family in an apartment or a home or in a shelter or even in a hotel, you just want to make sure that they're energy efficient and put solar panels on the roofs. And I think the days of single issue organizing have got to come to an end. You can't get the critical mass that you need to pass a bill of this magnitude if it's just a climate change bill. But It'll become a predominantly white movement. It needs to be a rainbow movement. A lot of people in the African American, Hispanic communities are like, well, what's this? What's in it for me? Climate change is in the future, even though it is now. Just ask the people in the Bahamas who had their island destroyed, or Puerto Rico, due to man-made climate change-induced super strength hurricanes. Farmers who can't grow their crops, people immigrating from Central America because of drought, being turned away at the border by the Trump administration, and children being locked in cages. I think we've allowed poverty to go on for far too long, both in America and around the world, and we have a moral duty to end it and save lives. Or it's immoral to just say I'm gonna work on climate change and not work on poverty. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
What organizations is Jamn partnering with to end poverty?
Sure. Well, you know what? A lot of times we do work with organizations, but we're really working more with individuals who are part of these organizations, because Jamn is very grassroots, kind of a bottom up movement. I will just tell you some of the organizations that I don't know if they would say they are part of Jamn, but they are involved in the network. I'm working with the Center for Biological Diversity out of Washington, D.C., working with Demos out of Washington, D.C., Results out of Washington, D.C., working with the Latino Farmers and Ranchers Association. I'm working with the National Environmental Chair of LULAC, which is the largest Latino civil and human rights organization in America. Those are our major partners. And again, these climate scientists, North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition, working with them. I work with Greenpeace. I work with the Sierra Club, NAACP, the Princess of Ghana. Work with her, work with you. You've been maintaining our Facebook page. We didn't have anyone to do it. A lot of former elected officials and current elected officials, Representative John Autry in the North Carolina General Assembly. We had Representative Grijalva from Arizona, who introduced our first resolution calling for 100% clean renewable energy by 2050. I was working, of course, with my former boss, Representative John Conyers, who recently passed away. May he rest in peace. So it's a pretty broad, Maya Rockamore, the late great Representative Cummings' wife, is now running in Baltimore for a congressional seat. Work very closely with her. So James Fukuda out of New York City, Practice of Peace, one of the largest builders of affordable housing. Donald Whitehead, National Coalition for the Homeless. So it's quite a panoply. It's a melange of so many different organizations and people. It's a great movement. I've enjoyed it so far.
Wow, thank you. On that note, you make me think about all the people that still don't believe that global warming is happening, that it's here. It's not a conspiracy. And I find that just incredibly shocking, because all you have to do is look around and look at the news, and you see flooding and you see droughts. And so I'm not sure how or why that is the case, but it seems like educating the public is at the core of it. Solutions is definitely part, and cohesive and crowdsourced collaboration amongst all the different solution variables. But educating, on the other hand, is also part of it. So how is Jamn, or how do you see educating the public?
Your questions, Jessica, are excellent. I wish there were more talk show hosts like you who have really researched this and really understand the nature of politics, the nature of change. It's quite impressive. Well, what I do is the same thing I did in Congress. If I felt like the staff and the members didn't understand an issue like universal health care, which they did not, or global AIDS, which they did not, then I would organize congressional briefings literally once a week or congressional hearings. And then I did town hall meetings outside of Congress. I think I did 400 town hall meetings with Congressman Conyers on universal health care. I pitched the movie Sicko to Michael Moore, which was about the plight of the uninsured in America. So I do a combination of congressional hearings, congressional briefings, town hall meetings, and then media, movies. I'm a big believer in using the arts, music. Um, I'm bringing in leading climate scientists, and I'm doing a series of webinars, not only here, but in Africa, to teach people about the threat of climate change and then what's the solution. 100% clean, renewable energy, rapid transition. And I'm doing my first one in North Carolina. Actually, no, it's nationally. I'm doing that in the fall at UNCC Charlotte, which I'm very excited about. So if you don't educate, you got to educate, and then you have to tell people, all right, you now know the crisis. Now, here's the bill that you need to advocate for, because ultimately there will be lawmakers on the local, state, and federal level that you're going to have to pressure and get them to pass legislation to do this transition. You can't do that without a movement and a coalition and an office and funding and staff, and that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Very well, thank you.
Sure.
And could you share, so I know you mentioned you're going to be doing some webinars, but what else is the Jamn community and network? What else do you do to keep all these different moving parts and people combined working together? Could you just share a little bit about how that works and
Yeah, sure.
you know,
Another great question, Jessica. We have monthly calls with all of our partners to let everyone get a chance to report to the network what they're doing in their respective cities or towns. That's really the main thing that we do, is keep everybody together. Otherwise, you have a siloed movement with one organization in this city doing one thing and one organization in this state doing another thing, all important work, but none of them having the chance to successfully put forward a transition for 100% clean renewable energy in 10 years, when you have a fossil fuel industrial complex, Wall Street industrial complex, the Republican Party industrial complex, corporate Democrat industrial complex, the media industrial complex. But you got to bring in celebrities. Celebrities are very important. I brought in Bono when we were losing mightily on HIV/AIDS in Africa and the third world developing nations. And then I brought in Alicia Keys and Justin Timberlake, and you got to bring in celebrities. But the key is you have to have a plan of action to educate and then mobilize and lobby. And that's the only way to win. And it has to be, you have to have money. If you have any listeners that would like to donate to the Justice Action Mobilization Network, they can get in touch with me at Joel, Joel, Segal, Segal, at gmail.com. We're in partnership with a group out of New York City called Practice of Peace. So, I've been doing this work for 30 years. And what I have found, if you build a coalition and it's founded on love, respect, dignity, compassion, empathy, it's multiracial. There's no one in charge. There's no egos. You're just trying to help the people, save the planet. Everything has worked out. It just has. Doesn't matter what I've worked on. It just always worked out that way. If you got to have the right intention. But you got to really be doing it for the people and the planet, not for your bank account or your ego. It's got to be about the people, and that's what I enjoy about this work. It's how I met you. I was trying to recruit you to work on climate change. I felt like you were probably one of the most important leaders. Not in the future, but now, and I think I've proven that hypothesis to be correct. I think this show needs to be a voice for the climate movement globally, not just in America, but globally. I think you didn't pay me to say this. I'm just telling you what I think. I think that you're critical for the success of our movement because you're a woman of color. You're highly intelligent. You know your subject matter. You got passion. And I think you, Jessica, and this show will be instrumental in getting our message out so we can change the policies and the policymakers. Because you can't change the policy unless you have to have the right policymakers. If you don't have the right policymakers, then you're not going to change the policy. So one thing we're going to organize is a PAC where we'll be given money to campaign contributions to people who are running for office so they have that agenda of 100% clean, renewable energy and green jobs.
Yeah, I think it's unbelievably important. And as you said, that's the whole point of this show, of doing this interview today and of all the interviews to come. I would love to interview everyone that sits on the board of Jamn's organization network. And
Sure.
and my goal would be to put a spotlight, and as you said it, to give a microphone and put a spotlight on those like yourself that have the solution and have the knowledge and have the passion and care, and through this medium promote the solution, and not just share the solution, but bring in investors. There are so many investors now that understand it's more profitable to be on the side of the solution, to be on the sustainable side, because they see the news, they're well read as well, and they know global warming is a real thing. It's here, it's a real threat, And I think that if we can give a microphone and give a voice to all these voices that need to be heard, then we have a really, 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 we have a really good chance of escalating the solutions. And that's the goal. That's absolutely the goal.
Look, well, let's make that happen. That includes members of Congress that I think you need to interview, UN officials, et cetera. I'm really worried about Africa and countries like Brazil or Cambodia, Vietnam. How are these third world countries or the cash poor countries going to go to 100% clean renewable energy without some kind of a United Nations global fund to do that? It has to happen. We have to think globally on this issue, and the Jamn is global. There's a lot of money to be made in clean energy, whether it's the manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, the kind of rapid transit we're going to need, electric batteries, hydrogen fuel cells, trucks that are run on battery. There's just so much innovation. I mean, I really feel like this is kind of a 21st century Silicon Valley, or when we went from the horse and buggy to the industrial age. This is what this is going to be, and this is a win-win for everybody. But there's a moral imperative for our succeeding generations. Do we want our children to live in weather that is so hot you die of a heat stroke, or there's floods and hurricanes and we run out of food, and that's where we're heading? And the thousands of scientists who have warned us over and over again that civilization is threatened by climate change, let's not do what Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has said. COVID-19, nothing to fear. It'll be over in a few weeks when it gets hot. Climate change, it's a hoax. Do we want to believe in thousands of scientists who are saying this is the biggest threat to human civilization, climate change? Or do we want to believe, and quite frankly, a president that's not well read, that doesn't believe in science, doesn't believe in physics? See, climate change isn't political. It's just physics and science, and that's it. And for those who don't think it's here, go to Puerto Rico. I went to Puerto Rico after the hurricane. I've never seen that destruction in my life. 60,000 homeless, their water system destroyed. I got sick for 1 week drinking the water there. I was hospitalized. Streets destroyed, electric grid destroyed. Go to the Bahamas, where they lost over 1,000 people. They've gone to 100% solar, by the way, the Bahamas, through what are called microgrids. So this is also an opportunity to create a new world that's cleaner. The minority health disparities that we're seeing with COVID-19 in the United States, a lot of that could be eliminated by using clean renewable energy, because the black and brown people who are breathing in petrochemicals and living near coal plants. 80% of black people live near coal plants. No, coal plants, I'm sorry. 80% of our coal plants are located in the black community. Breathing in automobile exhaust, breathing in lead paint, all that compromises your lungs. So you'll be more susceptible to COVID-19. Wouldn't it make sense to just eliminate the particulate matter that gets into your lungs and causes asthma and other things? And so it's just a win-win across the board. And right now, solar is much cheaper per megawatt than fossil fuels. It's gone down, 70, 80% of the cost. Wind energy, once you install your wind turbines in the ocean or on land, or your solar panels on parking lots, homes, or solar thermal farms, that's all. It's your upfront cost. You got to pay that. Then the energy is basically unlimited, clean, free, inexhaustible. Sun's not going out, and the wind's not going to stop. You have no fracking. You don't have to pollute, water from coal, right? All these like coal pits and stuff, and it's a no-brainer. But you have to educate the public to sound the alarm, but let them know, hey, you know what? Don't get depressed. There's solutions, and it's going to create jobs. It's a win-win for everybody. That's what and I think the benefit of me being the executive director of Jamn and having other people from the federal government, formerly in the federal government or state government or local government, that's what Jamn really is that we've worked in government and we know the levers of power that we have to influence to get legislation passed. I mean, I've passed many bills. Not too many people can say they passed major bills. And I had the good fortune to work for a member of Congress that facilitated that, whether it was the Hurricane Katrina Relief Act that I wrote with many people and we passed it, or the Affordable Care Act, which, I led that movement from the grassroots. I led it inside the Congress. Thank God for President Obama, but I got that experience and I'm going to lend that experience to this issue.
Thank you. Could you list a few of our allies in Congress? I know you mentioned Congressman Grijalva, which I also was able to meet when I lived in DC. And I know we can count on AOC or Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, but who else could you list out that we can count on?
Sure. I would say Senator Merkley is probably, we just did a national town hall meeting through the Jamn and COVID-19 Emergency Response Group. He was so impressive. He's very, very good. I would say Bernie Sanders, very, very, very good. Got a technical background. On the House, yeah, like you said, AOC, Ivana Presley, Rashida Tlaib, Grijalva. There's several members, and then Markey. They're good, but what I did in Congress for 13 years was I converted people to universal health care by having congressional briefings and hearings so they could really learn and understand, how serious this is. And so there's a lot of members of Congress who I think will, absolutely. Representative Jamie Raskin's very good. Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee. These are my colleagues, but they're not going to move into the direction that we want to go to unless we pressure them. You can't do that without a serious coalition. That's what Jamn is. Before Jamn, people were doing great work. They were in their silos. We had 2 national conferences, Jessica, one in Washington, D.C., at University of District of Columbia. The other was at NYU, Tisch School of the Arts. And that is where we got to know, all the leaders got to know each other. I wanted people to bond. It was an incredible experience with dance and music and arts. I can't emphasize enough the power of music, theater, and arts in this movement. It's very, very, very important. Progressive Democrats of America is another important partner. And then Russell Green, the former executive vice president of the Cheesecake Factory, he's a major partner in all. He's one of our senior advisors. He's phenomenal. And then there's a group called the Climate Emergency. What was it? The Climate Mobilization. And talk to them about the need to have a resolution in Congress if we're going to move anywhere on climate change. So they did come up with an incredible resolution that they're passing all across the country, declaring climate change an emergency. And that's what we have to do locally too. We got to work locally, get the city councils and county commissions to pass those kind of resolutions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes. So in the beginning, you mentioned that you're working on a COVID relief
Yes.
Movement. Could you just share a little bit about that and what it involves and, what resources are available to people?
Yeah, the COVID-19 Emergency Response Group was formed by former elected officials, interfaith leaders, academics, public health experts. And we knew that the kind of care that people were going to need, they're going to have a hard time getting it in terms of how we thought Congress works and still works, and who's President Trump and Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who's unbelievably right-wing, anti-government ideologue. And so we hold a call every Friday, a national call. We do town hall meetings. The purpose of this is really threefold. The first is to demand that we test and treat, contact trace, quarantine the people. So we have a national public health COVID-19 strategy and a plan. We don't have that. The president refuses to do that. Number two, that there's an economic safety net for the millions and millions of workers who are losing their jobs because of COVID-19. And that means a moratorium on utility cutoffs, water shutoffs, cable cutoffs, and evictions. We're working on that. Making sure there's universal health care during the time of COVID-19. So Bernie Sanders and Jayapal have a great bill that would basically do a Medicare for all program. And then make sure that the workers on the front line have mandatory OSHA guidelines, not voluntary, and that businesses would be liable, all that Trump is against, to make sure that when people do go back to work, they can go to work without dying and being infected COVID-19. We're concerned about people in prisons who are throwaway people, homeless people. They need to be out of those institutions and into housing or apartments with care, and that's not happening. Those are petri dishes, homeless shelters and prisons, but that's what we're concerned with. But we want to make sure that unemployment insurance is robust. People have enough food. They have not just the food bank food, but they can get a SNAP card and get $300 to $400 a month for food. So we want government to do its job. We want like a COVID-19 emergency New Deal. That's what we're calling it.
Thank you. If someone wanted to get a hold of or read more or find out how to get some of these resources that you mentioned, where would they go?
Well, the best thing to do would be to email me at Joel, Joel, .r.segal, Segal, @gmail.com, or they could just Google COVID-19 Emergency Response Group, and that would take them to our webpage and Facebook page. Or call me at 571-344-1518. Call me directly. I'm a believer in direct contact with people. We want to be a voice for the people, Jessica, that are going to be left out. The working poor, the unemployed, gig worker, the small business person, the shop owner, the person who cuts your chicken. But we really want immigrants who are considered illegal to have a path to citizenship so that they can get the benefits of the stimulus packages. This whole word illegal, whatever, undocumented, I don't believe in that. I believe we're all global citizens of the planet, and there should be a path to citizenship, to legal residency, and then ultimately citizenship that, the 20 million or so undocumented immigrants they're paying taxes, they're paying sales taxes, they're paying FICA, Medicare, Social Security taxes. Why shouldn't there be a path to citizenship in this emergency? There should have been a path to citizenship before, but the far right wing, led by Donald Trump and Breitbart magazine and Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, they wanted to get elected into office, and the way Trump did that was by invoking, make America white again. That's what I think it was. Putting thousands of children in cages as a deterrence to go back to their countries. Many people have died who had to go back to their countries, even though the government knew they were going to die. And, really, if you look at it realistically, many of the Native Americans who were here before the Europeans came here are the so-called immigrants, the people of Indian descent who were here way before the Europeans got here. So I have a hard time calling them illegal immigrants. I would say that the people who came here and took people and stole people's land, there needs to be, I'd say, reparations or remuneration for stealing Native Americans' land. This would be a good one, just citizenship. If you're going to be working in building buildings, cooking people's food, cleaning up hotels, picking tomatoes, et cetera, in the hot sun, you should become a citizen. I'm not saying you let everyone in, but for those who are already here, there should be a path to citizenship.
Exactly. I feel like we should have a follow-up call to go into a few more questions, and then get into more detail of what Jamn is working on. And I would really like this to become that, where
we need you. We need this broadcast. We need you. Like I said, we're global. So we got people in Africa, people in Europe, and without this broadcast, we don't really have a global channel, and we have to be globally connected. And I think your show needs to be that show. That's why I'm on this show today, and we'll be working with you on subsequent shows because you're the perfect person to do this.
Thank you. I really couldn't be happier to be working with you and giving, a voice to your voice, to my passion, to everyone who sits on Jamn's board and their solutions. So I have huge expectations, and I really cannot wait to just keep going and just continue to give a voice to this movement. So thank you so much.
We need women.
Yes.
We need women, especially women of color who are not in leadership of this movement, but many of them are in leadership, but they're too invisible. There's no reason why Jessica Gonzales can't speak in front of the United Nations one day like Greta did, or there's no reason why you can't be at the highest levels of meetings, which you've already been with me in Congress, when you're with these energy companies or presidents of other countries. I do think that is the role that you're going to be playing, Jessica. And I want everyone who's listening or watching to understand that you are right now one of the single most important leaders in the world on climate change and ending poverty. I've worked with you for a long time. I know your potential, and this is a great, I think, step for you to do the show. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you. I don't know if you need any help, but if you do, I'm here to help.
Thank you. And yes, I do. Yes, absolutely. I think we can do great things together. And I really I'm just excited. I'm just so excited. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for believing in the show. And just thank you.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And many more shows to come. This is not going to be done overnight, climate change and ending poverty. It's going to be a lifelong struggle. But the good news is we can do this. When I started working on global AIDS when I was in Congress, people were like, really, Joel? You're going to get George W. Bush to pass PEPFAR $15 billion a year for antiretrovirals? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do it. Our movement's going to do it. I co-founded a group called the Global AIDS Alliance. I brought in Dr. Paul Zeitz from Zambia, who worked for the United Nations. I brought in Bono. I asked Bono on behalf of John Conyers and the Congressional Black Caucus to work on global AIDS. And 4.5 months later, we passed PEPFAR. I brought in African leaders. There's a thing called God and the universe. the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. You have to make it bend. But like I said, in the 30 years that I've been doing this work, I've never been part of a movement that lost as long as it was a coalition. We had love. We were a family. We were a team. There was no ego. We were just fighting for the people. And I will let you know we're going to win this struggle for 100% clean renewable energy and crushing climate change and putting people to work, ending poverty. There's no reason to have a world with poverty when we have so much wealth. And as
Yeah,
Pope
exactly.
Francis said in his encyclical, we throw away people. No, we don't have to throw away people. We don't have to throw away anybody. There's another law of economics that I call spiritual economics and moral economics. There's an ecosystem that's our physical ecosystem. There's also a human ecosystem. Every life is precious. I don't believe that God wants a small group of people to own all of our wealth. And then hundreds of millions of people die of lack of nutrition, in a flood because of climate change, lack of health care. I think that's the old system. We need a new system where, there's equality across the board, and it's got to be global, not just in America. That's not unrealistic. That's what God wants us to do. That's what we're supposed to do as human beings, care about each other. There's plenty of money and wealth. Paper is just a monetization of wealth. It's just a piece of paper. It's a coin. You can't let pieces of paper and coin trump human life. We just can't.
Right.
And when I hear people say, well, Joel, what you're saying is going to cost too much, I'm going to well, how much is a human being's life worth? And if they happen to be black or brown or yellow, all of a sudden they don't count as much as people of European descent. I beg to differ. That's wrong. It's immoral. And I'll close by saying we must cancel all the debts of third world countries, because if you're spending more on paying off your debt than you are on healthcare infrastructure, we have a problem. If you're going to transition to 100% clean renewable energy, how can you do that? How can you build solar panels and wind turbines and housing if you're paying off these vulture capitalism debts from banks? And it's wrong, but we got to speak up and speak out. But we can't do it in our silo. We got to be one extended family guided by the highest principles of love and logic, and we can win. And that's why, again, your generation is so important. Your generation is the generation that I believe can lead this. We can help, we can give some advice, but your generation is got to lead this because it's going to impact you the most.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And that's what I would hope this show would inspire as well, would be my generation to speak up, because we're the new leaders. And that's a responsibility I feel very heavily, to speak up and to use, my experience and everything that has made me who I am up to this point,
Amen.
to use my voice, and that's what I intend to do. So thank you so much. I feel incredibly honored and privileged to know you, to call you my friend, to have had you believe in me when I shared this idea with you over a year ago now. And it's surreal to be talking to you today and to have kicked this off.
That's great.
It's very exciting, and I can't thank you enough. So
Oh, it's my pleasure. You've worked so hard, and this is going to see. You've got what the Chinese call a pure heart, Jessica. You're motivated to just do good. That's the only thing that motivates you, is to just do good for human beings. And when you have a pure heart, you can accomplish anything. And people who succeed in life, they do it because they built friendships. People respected and trusted them because they know that they were sincere in their intentions. So that's what you are. And I'm just as proud of you and honored to be with you as well.
thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll connect soon. We'll set a date offline, and I would love to bring in a member from Jamn's network so that we can start talking about their technology or what Jamn's working on or the legislation. So I'll let you decide who you think we should bring in next, and
Sure.
we'll co-host this, and we'll just keep the momentum going and painting a picture for the public to know, what Jamn's about, what we're building, and just keep weaving in people. We'll bring in investors, and
Thank you.
we'll keep this growing. So thank you.
Just keep the love going. Keep it fun. That's the key. Got to keep it fun. Fun and
Yes.
respect. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go. I wish
Okay.
you a wonderful day.
You too.
And yes, and we'll talk very soon. And good luck on everything. And I can't wait
All
to hear
right.
some updates.
Yeah, love you much. Big hug.
Yes. Same, how we say in Thailand. Okay.
All right.
Same. All righty.
Same. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.